Welcome to the YAHAHA Essentials Tutorial Series. My name is Chris, or you may know me better online as Chulu Longhorn. I'm here with YAHAHA doing these tutorials to show you how to set up the basics in your space. Today, we'll be going over the Asset Library. The Asset Library is where you'll find a veritable cornucopia of resources for building your levels. It contains everything from simple walls and doors to sounds and skies. So join me to explore the abundance that is the YAHAHA Asset Library. As fall draws to an end and the weather grows chilly, it's the perfect time to gather our harvest of resources from the Asset Library while dreaming of summertime. And where better to dream of sun and sand than back in the summer beach template? Ah, nice and warm. The Asset Library is extensive and ever-growing. It contains an ample supply of platform-ready assets for our spaces, allowing us to build up a scene very quickly. We can browse around and find what we want to lay in, such as plants, trees, scene objects, and characters, and put them into our scenes, allowing us to build rich, interesting spaces without spending a lot of time creating and refining art. As you can see, the platform is continuing to evolve, and the YAHAHA staff have been cultivating an abundance of assets for us to utilize. In fact, in the few short months since the first Essentials tutorial, they've increased our asset supply tenfold, and they intend to continue increasing it going forward. As much as the editor interface has been tilled and reseeded recently, the Asset Library is in the same place, ripening nicely in the upper right corner. Let's go over the abundant features available to us before we dig into the soil of the assets themselves. In the upper left corner, we have the forward and back buttons. They allow us to navigate back and forth through our previously visited areas during an asset browsing session. Also, your navigation memory is retained between asset browsing sessions until you close the editor. Now, let's look at the various views arranged here at the top. The home view is the first view we encounter when we open the Asset Library for the first time during each editing session. Each of the other views filters the library by one of the major asset categories: models, audio assets, sky assets, and community components. Also, each of them changes the arrangement of the library a bit to help us further refine our searches for assets. Speaking of searching the library, let's take a look at the main tool in our shed for searching through the plethora of assets available to us, and that's the search box. The search box allows us to do custom searches. Okay, to begin our harvest of assets, let's look for pumpkins. As you can see, entering pumpkin in the search box brings up all sorts of assets related to pumpkins, such as pumpkin snowmen, pumpkin patches, and pumpkin pie. Yum! Anyone have any whipped cream? Now, let's search for something a bit broader, say fruit. This brings up all sorts of assets related to fruit, including the word fruit. Next, let's search for something a bit different, a creator. I've chosen one which is fairly recognizable and often makes staff picks, Decagon Studios. We can now see that we only get art assets from Decagon. Finally, let's search for something to help us gather our harvest, a basket. See how it replaces the studio and brings up baskets? I'll demonstrate a slightly different behavior in relation to creators a bit later. We can also combine sorting and searching and further refine our searches for assets. Let's click on the Models button again and sort by the Models category, and then do a search for the term garden. Now, we get only models related to the term garden, which refines our choices quite a bit. Let's try another and sort by audio, then search the term wind. Now, we only get audio assets which have to do with wind, helping us narrow our search considerably and helping us find the right windy sound. Okay, let's finish plowing our way across the top here and check out the Unpaid Assets button. To demonstrate this, let's put an asset we haven't purchased into our space. This sky asset here will work for our purposes. Once it's loaded, we can return to the Asset Library and see that there is a red dot next to the Unpaid Assets button. If we click on it, it'll tell us that the sky we picked is an unpaid asset in use in our space, and if we want to publish our space with it in there, we will need to purchase it. For now, let's not worry about that. as I'll go over the asset purchasing process a bit later. Okay, next let's check out the profile info. By clicking on your profile image here, you will get all your profile information pertaining to asset purchasing. You can see your currency balance, purchase more currency, and view your order history. Currently, clicking on either of these links takes you to your account on the YAHAHA website. Finally, to finish off our furrow across the top of the asset library here, we come to the Close button, which we'll click on because if there's an X, we just have to click it. This closes the asset library and takes us back to the editor. While we're here, let's remove that sky we added before we head back into the asset library. Now that we're done taking a look across the top of the library, let's explore the home view a bit more. First, of course, we have the banner at the top, which will always let us know about interesting things going on with the assets in YAHAHA. Clicking on a banner will do different things depending on what it is. As you can see, the assets in the home view are sorted by what's most popular by default. We can also sort them by what's most recent. Let's put that back to popular, because popularity isn't overrated at all. And let's check out the filter dropdown on the right. We can use this to filter our assets and get different views of what's available. Finally, I want to show you that the home view will continually load more assets as you scroll down the page, and that no matter how deep down this asset rabbit hole we go, we can always get quickly back to the top by clicking on the little arrow on the bottom right. Okay, let's take a look at the asset category views. Each of these views sorts the asset list by one of the major asset categories. They also look a bit different than the home view. As you can see, they don't have the banner at the top, they have a sorting tag automatically set, and they contain the sorting panel on the right. These views also don't continually load assets as you scroll like the home view, but instead have a paging widget at the bottom for navigating through the asset list in Pages. Each of the other views contains the same layout and functionality. The category views also contain a more robust sorting menu, which allows for more specific sorting of the asset list, helping you to better find that perfect asset. Speaking of finding the perfect asset, let's take a look at the sorting panel and the different ways it can be used to sort the asset list. To do this, we'll expand the Model category and choose 3D Text. Now, we're only seeing 3D text models. Okay, now let's combine two categories by expanding the Audio category and selecting Ambiance. Now we can see both 3D text and environmental sound effects, which could be helpful if we're working on a city storefront scene. That's where us city slickers go to do most of our harvesting. Alright, let's turn off the 3D text category and turn on the Logic category. Now we can see both gameplay components and sound effects, which would be useful if you're trying to add both a behavior and a sound effect to an object. Finally, let's deselect Audio, which deselects the Ambiance subcategory, leaving us with just components. Now let's take a look at how price sorting works. This section is a bit different than the categories section and can be helpful when you're dealing with different levels of paid assets. To do this, we'll select the Sky view. Notice how selecting a major view from the menu at the top replaced our previous refinements. As you can see, the Sky category contains some paid and some free assets. Now let's expand the pricing section and select the free assets checkbox, because who doesn't like free stuff? Now we've cleared the paid assets from the list, leaving only the free ones. Next, we'll take a look at price sorting. We'll need to uncheck the free assets box so that we can again see paid assets. Then we can either use the slider, or we can enter a specific value in the lower or upper range boxes. We'll enter 10 in the lower range box and click the check mark. Now, the free assets are gone and we're left with assets costing 10Y and more. Finally, If we drag the slider, setting the lower value back to 0, and click the check mark, we get the free assets back again. Yay! Okay, let's clear our sorting filters by clicking on Clear next to the sorting terms, giving us a view that's the same as the category views, but without any filters at all. Each of the other sections in the sorting panel works similarly to the first two, but each allows for sorting on different criteria. The Published By section allows us to list assets by who published the assets we're looking for, be it YAHAHA or the creator community. The Estimated Memory Usage section allows us to cull assets based on how much memory they will take up in a space, helping us to better control our space performance on the various platforms. The Triangle Count section allows us to winnow out assets with too many or too few triangles, allowing us to keep to a particular look in our spaces, as well as better control our space performance. And last but not least, we have the Staff Picks, which lets us browse the assets the YAHAHA staff find most interesting. Now let's look at the asset list itself. In the list, we have a picture of the asset, giving us a preview of what the asset looks like, the asset name, the asset creator, the number of likes the asset has, and the cost of the asset. As you likely noticed, hovering over the asset picture gives us a couple more options. Options are good. Let's see what they do. By clicking on the plus button, we can add the asset to our personal assets. If the asset has a cost, the plus button will be replaced by the Buy Now button, which will allow us to purchase the asset. The other thing we can do from here is view the asset in our scene. By clicking here, we jump back into the scene and load the asset in near the camera's location, which we can then grab and place anywhere in our scene. Okay, now let's pop back into the asset library and continue our exploration there. Another thing we can do from the asset info is filter by creator. By clicking on the creator's name, we can populate the asset list with only assets by that creator. We have some nice functionality when we filter by creator in this way. Let's head to the sorting panel and expand the model category and click the check mark next to nature. Now we can see we are sorted by both the creator with the nature category added on top of it. Now if we type pumpkin into the search box, we get their garden bed pumpkin asset. So, as you can see, we can sort through the assets by a certain creator if we start with a search for assets by that creator, which can be very helpful as we glean through the asset library for just the right asset. Alright, now let's dig into the asset page as we continue to cultivate our knowledge of the asset library. First though, let's clear our last search so we can start fresh as we move forward. We can drill into the asset page if we click on the name or image of an asset in the asset list. Once here, we can see more details about the asset we've chosen and find assets directly related to it. Let's start with the breadcrumbs at the top. Breadcrumbs are great. They can be used for all sorts of things: baking, frying, feeding the birds, but these breadcrumbs are extra cool. They can be used for navigation and sorting. Clicking on any of these will take us back to the asset list, filtered by the term we selected, thus helping us search for assets similar to the one we were just viewing. Nice! Next we have the Asset Viewer, which allows us to rotate the asset around so that we can get a better look at it. This is probably my favorite part of the asset page, because it really allows you to inspect an asset you're considering using, which can be very helpful in deciding whether or not to place it in a space. Just below that, we have the Creator section, which allows us to view more assets by the creator of the asset we're currently viewing. This section contains 4 random assets from the creator in a mini asset list. And we can even choose to browse all the assets created by this creator by clicking on the See All link, which takes us to a creator sorted view of the asset list, just like clicking on the creator's name. Just to the right of the asset viewer, we have more information about the asset. From top to bottom, we have the asset name, the number of likes the asset has, the number of times the asset has been used, and the asset's cost. We then have the View in Scene button, which works just like the one we get when we hover over an asset image in the asset list. And below that, we have the Add to My Assets or Buy Now button, either of which allow us to procure the asset. Next, we have the Creator area, where clicking on the creator's name works just like it does everywhere else in the asset library, giving us a sorted list of the assets by that creator. Following the Creator area is the Tags section, which this asset doesn't have. Let's switch to an asset which does so we can demonstrate. The Tags section contains terms which the asset is tagged with to make searching and sorting easier. Clicking on a tag takes you to a tag sorted list, just like clicking on the breadcrumbs above. Note that this section will only be visible for assets which have been tagged by their creator. If the asset has no tags, then this section will not appear, like in our previous asset page, which we'll switch back to so we can finish our asset page walkthrough. Below the Tags section, or Creator area, we have the Likes area, where we can vote an asset up or down, affecting the asset's likes rating. Moving on, we have the Info section, which contains some very useful information about the asset, such as when it was published and last updated, how much memory it will take in our space, and how many triangles the asset contains. The last two are pieces of info we can use to determine how using the asset will affect our space's performance on various platforms. On that subject, here's a pro tip. Any space using over 570 megabytes of memory is going to push mobile and low-end hardware pretty hard. So, if you want the best player experience on all platforms, keep your spaces below 550 meg. Just under the Info section, we have a link which can be used to report an asset we find which perhaps contains questionable content or which doesn't seem to be working correctly. Simply put information you wish to report about the asset in the dialog box and click Submit. I would suggest using this feature sparingly because reporting assets too often could lead to the boy who cried wolf syndrome. Finally, at the bottom of the asset view, we have the You Might Also Like section. This section is a list of assets similar to the one you're currently viewing by the creator of that asset. It can be useful for matching other assets to the look and style of the asset you're viewing. Okay, let's finish our work in the asset library by looking at one final and important process, the process of purchasing assets. First, let's look at an asset for sale in the asset list by exploring the Sky category. As you can see, when we hover over an asset which is for sale, we get an important change, and that's the Add button becomes the Buy Now button. This works basically the same as it does inside the asset page, where we'll go to demonstrate it so we can focus on a single asset. Alright, here we are. As you can see, when we click on the Buy Now button, we get the payment dialog. If we were to click on the Cancel button from here, we would exit the payment dialog without purchasing the asset, which we can always do to drop out of the process prior to making the purchase. If we click on the Pay Now button, we will initiate the purchase, and the cost of the asset will be deducted from our currency balance. Once that happens, we get the successful purchase dialog, which gives a couple of options. We can either check our orders with the Check My Orders button, which will take us to our purchase history within our profile on the YAHAHA site, or we can finish the order process and exit out of the payment process by clicking the Done button. Once we've purchased an asset, it becomes available to us just like the free assets do within the My Assets section of the resource box. All we have to do is download it and load it into our scene. And boom! There it is! I bet you thought I wouldn't get that into this tutorial. Here's something cool. While we were working on this video, we got another nice upgrade to the asset library we wanted to show you. So we've added it here before we wrap up. We now have a My Assets button here in the asset library. With the My Assets button, we can view a sortable and filterable list of the assets we've added to our personal asset collections. We can sort this list either by using the sorting menu on the top left, or we can filter the list by using the sorting panel and selecting the checkbox next to any of the categories or subcategories available to us there. Entering something in the search box or selecting on one of the main view buttons at the top will take us out of our personal asset list, returning us to one of the asset views. Okay, now we can end. Our harvest baskets are now full, and we've come to the end of our work in the asset library. As you can see, the asset library is an integral part of creating any space. It's a place for us to gather all the assets we may need to complete our spaces and have them overflowing with a bountiful array of dazzling objects of all kinds. That does it for this tutorial, but there will be more, so don't forget to like and subscribe so you can be notified when we post those. Also, be sure to visit us on Discord and in the forums to discuss space creation. Thanks for watching. We'll see you again soon.